Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder, and this is BRN Weekly for Saturday, May 9th, 2020. And our top story this week, the impact of the pandemic on retirement income adequacy. And joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Jack Vanderhey. He is the research director for the Employee Benefits Research Institute, or EBRI. Jack, thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great to talk with you. And you and the folks at EBRI do amazing research on things like healthcare and retirement. This is a troubling time for so many Americans struggling with their finances. And I know you and the Research Institute have done some research on the impact of the pandemic on retirement adequacy. What can you tell us that after taking a look at the numbers?
Well, let me just give you a couple seconds of background. This is a model we've been using since the late 1990s to model retirement income adequacy for all U.S. households. I want to make sure that's clear because sometimes people hear these numbers and they think I'm only talking about people who are lucky enough to work for employers who sponsor a plan. But we look at all U.S. households between the ages of 35 and 64. What we find is the present value of retirement deficits, in essence, how much more you would need in your accounts after tax when you retire, presumably at 65, to not suffer any retirement shortfalls. We take the present value of that, put it in 2020 dollars, and it's $3.68 trillion before anything happened on January 1st, 2020. Boy. So from that, we did two things. First of all, since I knew what the first quarter investment losses were, I was able to run a scenario showing how much you had as far as an increase in the retirement deficits from what's already happened. And then, as you know, there are many different types of assumptions as far as what both employers and employees might be doing as a reaction to what's going on with respect to the pandemic. Things like, do employers suspend their matches? If the employers suspend their matches, do the employees cut back on their contributions? If you have situations where small employers might start to terminate their plans. We looked at a percentage of people with less than $10 million in assets. What about withdrawals? Things like hardship withdrawals, loans, cash outs, etc. And then finally, what is unemployment going to do as far as decrease in the overall participation probabilities? Yeah. So we basically throw that together. We have intermediate assumptions, optimistic assumptions, pessimistic assumptions. And I think the most telling thing was, even if we combine all the pessimistic assumptions together, and that included investment experience, which was the same as what we saw in the 2007, 8, and 9 market crisis, and put in all the other sets of assumptions, at most, we could only get an 11.2% increase in retirement deficits. Now, obviously, that's a large number, but it's not the end of the world as many people have been portraying this. Now, certainly some individuals who are much more dramatically affected than others will have larger increases in the retirement deficits than that. But overall, it appears thus far to be a very manageable situation for the U.S. households in aggregate.
Yeah, and I think that's an important message for people. Jack, what about those folks that are 5 years out from retirement, those pre-retirees? You know, I think back to 2008 and what happened there, and we had that experience. Many people now invested in target date funds, right? That seems to be a very popular option for a lot of people because of the Pension Protection Act. What about that segment of the population who are close to retirement? How did they fare? How does it look like they fare over time?
Well, the remarkable thing is, and there's actually an issue brief at ebri.org if you'd like to have all the information I'm about to talk about. We broke everything out by age cohort every 5 years, and it was almost remarkably flat. The people closest to retirement got hit, obviously, much more damaging percentages from the investment experience. But if you look at the termination of small plans, obviously that's going to impact the young people the most. So overall, we had about a 4.5% increase in retirement deficits under the intermediate set of assumptions for people, regardless of whether they're 35 to 40 or 60 to 64. It was remarkably constant.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's a lot of people stayed the course. I mean, read the policy briefings that you put out. Many of the record keepers have said that people have stayed the course in terms of their asset allocation. I think those are some lessons learned, perhaps from what we experienced in other volatile times. What does this mean? Or Jack, the question I want to ask you now is, what about in-service withdrawal? So we had the CARES Act. People are now allowed to take up to $100,000, extend the amortization period out from 5 years to 6 years, right? They're also allowed to take penalty-free withdrawals. Do you see that? And it's hard to get the numbers, right? I mean, we just are experiencing this now, about 30 to 60 days in. But have you got a sense for what the impact of that could be to this retirement adequacy?
Yeah, let me make a couple of comments right up front that are probably obvious. It's going to take a while until we know what the employer reaction is, because obviously not all employers are going to make this available to their employees. It's going to take a while for us to find out the employees who are currently constrained. Maybe they're already at 50,000. Now we can jump to 100,000. What is their reaction going to be? I also think there's going to be a bleed over effect or a peer effect, that once people start seeing other people take use of this increase or decrease constraint, that they're going to start relying on it. So it's going to be at least a couple of weeks until we have the data to be able to indicate that. But my prediction, when this is all said and done, is that the increased retirement deficits that might arise because of the CARES Act are probably going to pale in comparison to what's happening in terms of cash outs. Because if unemployment continues to stay at high levels for a while, you're going to find obviously people losing their jobs, cashing out their existing balances, which has really no impact from CARES. And it's going to be those situations where they take that money out instead of rolling it over to an IRA. It's probably going to have a much, much larger impact than loosening the constraints from the CARES Act.
Jack, the studies that you and the Research Institute do and EBRI do really informs a lot of policymakers. We don't yet know when all the states are going to go open up. We know that many Americans, as you implied or talked about, are unemployed. They're now focusing on the here and now. They are focusing on putting food on the table for their families, schooling their children if they have young children, and doing all those things. What do you think long term? How do we kind of resurrect ourselves? If you had to think about that from a policy perspective, what about resurrecting ourselves post-pandemic?
Well, the good news, and I did have obviously a ideal situation with the database we have administrative data, 27 million 401k participants from 110,000 plans going back to 1996. So I was able to do a lot of study of the 2007, 8, and 9 market crisis. The nice thing about what happened back then is if you look at individuals who basically had employers who suspended matches then, when the matches were put back into place, and it was a function of how generous the matches were, but overall, the employees not only came back, but they came back at a higher contribution rate overall, even adjusting for salary increase, than they were putting money away prior to the market crisis. So I think there's a sense that people realize that if they have to suspend contributions for a while, or perhaps because of CARES, dip into those funds, that they do realize that it's of paramount importance that those monies do go back in as soon as they have the opportunity, as soon as they have the necessary additional funds to start refunding their retirement balance.
And I know that as on the date that we're filming this, there has been some movement in the Congress to allow for the expansion of retirement contributions. And Jack, does that kind of align with what you're describing? If the matches get reinstalled, people have the opportunity to get reemployed or to find money to put back in, that these expanded contribution amounts would help them kind of rekindle what they may have lost.
Right. I mean, certainly anybody who's going to have the necessary funds to go beyond what the current limits are, I think will definitely benefit from that. I'm not, again, tell me how long this pandemic lasts, and I can give you a better prediction. But I think there's going to certainly be individuals who will probably, at least in the immediate future, be constrained sufficiently that they can't immediately make use of that, but they probably will have the opportunity later on.
And Jack, you mentioned, or we talked about kind of what happened in the past. How often do you refresh, or how often are you planning to refresh this adequacy study given the circumstances? We'd be looking at this on a monthly basis, quarterly basis?
Well, if the reporters had their way, it would be a daily basis. Right now, we've been doing it basically on a quarterly basis, but I suspect that I'm going to be rerunning everything on May 1st when we get the monthly evaluations in. So I suspect we'll have that information available for you or for anybody else who might be interested in it. But the big change will come in when we have enough data as far as how the employers are reacting and how the employees are reacting as a response to what the employers are doing to go along with just the investment losses.
Yeah. Well, Jack, amazing work. And I think this is really helpful information to instruct employers, instruct policymakers. And I know I'm looking forward to seeing the refresh data whenever you get it. No pressure from me, of course. Jack, always a pleasure chatting with you. Great work done by you and the folks at eBree. Look forward to having you back on the program very soon.
Thank you very much.
And when we come back, we'll take a look at the best segments this week on our program. So stay tuned right here on BRN Weekly. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. They are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
The windows on our homes, they protect us and the ones we love, but they do much more. At Renewal by Andersen, making your home more comfortable is at the center of every window we make. It's why we custom build our windows in America and install them in as little as 1 day. It's why we build our frames with exclusive Fibrex composite material that's 2 times stronger than vinyl. It's why our glass helps keep your home warmer in winter, cooler in summer, and quieter all year long. It's why we stand behind every window with a 20-year limited warranty. Why not help lower your energy costs while giving your home and family the best? Call 1-800-835-6525 to schedule a free in-home consultation. Buy one, get one at 40% off with this special offer. Plus, get special financing with no money down, no monthly payments, and no interest for 1 full year. Renewal by Andersen, the better way to a better window. Call 1-800-835-6525 now.
Welcome back. On Monday, I sat down with Morningstar's David Blanchett to look at how investors reacted to the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's take a look.
Well, I think that it's safe to say that recent market volatility is unprecedented, right? We haven't really seen anything like this happen ever. And, we're curious, how are participants in 401k plans responding to what's going on? Are they making changes? And high level, what we saw is in the last quarter, the movement in trading was about what we see on an annual basis. So it's 4 times the average movement in money, but it's very different across different investor types. I mean, high level, what we found is the participants who are in professionally managed solutions like managed accounts or target date funds were making a lot less changes than those who are self-directing their accounts or kind of trading without using a professional manager. I'm not sure yet what the performance was of the various qualified default investment alternatives. I think that they're probably going to perform about as you'd expect on a risk-adjusted basis, right? So most of them are relatively risky, right? Most investors in defined contribution plans have, 20 or 30 years until retirement, then they've got retirement that's going to last 20 or 30 years beyond that. And so, they are pretty aggressive. I mean, the average participant lost maybe around 15% in the quarter. It could have been worse if it wasn't for cash flows. And so it wasn't a pretty quarter. And a lot of folks are going to be surprised when they see their statements. Now, they've made some of that back, since March 31st, but it was clearly not a good time to be investing. But I think like the key for me, at least for us, was that people that had help, that weren't doing it themselves, saw a better outcome in terms of less trading. So we don't know how things will go in the future, but the worst thing that we think that someone can do is be moving back and forth from cash and stocks and bonds and all that. So we want to get people to stay the course, and we saw some of that, but not among the folks, especially who are older. People closer to retirement were the ones that really made pretty profound changes in their portfolios, really reacted the most to the recent volatility. So I think that what we see now is less of the kind of exotic strategies, but at the same time, we had a very interesting market impact in 2008 versus today. So I don't know. I'd like to think that we're all smarter because of what happened, but I'm not convinced that we are. I think that the one thing that has changed, though, since '08 is that a lot of people are now using these default investments, right? Yep. We see more participants who are kind of, joining a plan and saying, hey, I don't want to do this. I'll just use a target event. And that, to me, will probably be the biggest thing. I think that people, don't have to worry as much about trading and stuff like that. And so they're not, going to be trading at a time that they shouldn't be. About 80% of participants who are younger use the default. Only about half of the participants who are near retirement do so. And so there's this interesting effect where people that appear to need it the most, like younger people actually that are suffering, are doing a phenomenal job. A lot of them stayed the course. A lot of them actually got more aggressive. And so we're seeing some, what I would call like really positive behaviors from younger investors. It's the older investors who are the least likely to use like the target date fund, but actually making the worst decisions. And so I think, to me, a really big important takeaway from all this is how do we get people who are closer to retirement to delegate investment responsibility, to use a target date fund, to use managed accounts, just to do something other than build the portfolio themselves. Managed accounts is kind of the original robo. I mean, managed accounts and DC plans have been around for over 20 years. And I mean, let's be honest. I mean, it wasn't widely available or scalable back in 2008, right? I think that, it's not perfect for everyone by any means, but, if I'm someone that wants a low cost, professionally managed portfolio, it's a pretty good option, right? And so I think that for me, the key is giving investors access to solutions that they're willing to use, that to kind of delegate that responsibility. And so I see robo as a viable path. I'm a big fan of financial advisors in general. I think that the key really is finding something that someone trusts enough to say, hey, I'm not going to do this myself. I'm going to let you handle this for me going forward.
And on Wednesday, I sat down with Deputy Treasurer Elena Tassel to see how the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is helping to empower citizens and provide financial education. Let's take a look. We normally have a number of in-person programming. We run senior fraud and prevention workshops at senior centers and councils on aging. We were also planning a number of women's financial summits that would focus on financial education geared towards women. We also have additional programming that are geared towards members of the military community as well, too. We also offer a grant program to local high schools called their
called Credit for Life fairs, where students take on a salary and a budget, and they have to make real life decisions. It's actually one of our more popular programs. And what we were able to do, that's a partnership that we do with the Massachusetts Division of Banks, and we were able to extend the grants for that program into next school year so that
Great.
schools have a lot more flexibility. We actually, what we did was, as we saw that we were not going to have a lot of our in-person programming, we wanted to make sure that we were still getting information out to seniors and women, as well as other groups across Massachusetts. And just a few weeks ago, we launched Money Talk Tuesdays. Every Tuesday at noon, we're having a webinar focused on different financial topics. We're working with the Massachusetts Financial Planners Association. And so we're really presenting a lot of the topics that we would do in person in that format. Our first one was focused on women. We were planning on ones for seniors. We actually had one yesterday about veterans. This is something we're planning on doing into the future. And then we're hoping, we obviously can't predict the future in terms of when we're going to be able to offer in-person programming,
Sure.
but we very much are hoping that we're able to do so, perhaps in the fall. We honestly don't know, but when we do, we're hoping to be able to offer locally the Women's Financial Summits and continue talking to seniors in person. I think that we still don't know what the new normal is going to look like. We're still planning. Right now, we're really actively working on getting resources to residents that they're going to need right now during this pandemic. So we really are trying to, like I said, continue to offer our digital tools and resources. We're finding that there is a lot of interest in continuing to do that for the time being. This is a big topic for state treasurers. Treasurer Goldberg, the treasurer of Massachusetts, she's actually the president of the National Association of State Treasurers. And we actually talk, we have, there's a financial education and empowerment committee that meets and talks about best practices across the state. And so if residents outside of Massachusetts are looking for resources or tools, their state treasurer's office is a great place to turn.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN Weekly. But don't forget, we're back again tomorrow because we have our weekly podcast where we analyze all the news in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, and so much more. You're not going to want to miss it. So tune in to BRN Sunday. It's an amazing show, and we all really enjoy getting together and providing the content to you. So until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Attention! The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services has officially authorized new benefits that Medicare Advantage plans may include. To get the benefits you deserve, you can call the Medicare Coverage Helpline.
Hi, I'm Joe Namath. If you're on Medicare, this is important information. I called the Medicare Coverage Helpline and they instantly looked up my coverage. In this one simple call, they offered to enroll me in a plan that includes rides to medical appointments, private home aides, doctors and nurses' visits by telephone, and even home-delivered meals. The plan also includes dental, vision, hearing, and prescription drug coverage, all at no additional cost.
Don't delay. Call to see if the new benefits are available in your area.
Call the number on your screen now. It's free.
Call 1-800-757-1451. That's 1-800-757-1451.